Well, now a story slightly unusual for me covering this story. Some of you will remember 2 years ago, relatively soon after the platform started, I lost a family member, my brother James, to suicide almost 2 years ago, just a little over 2 years ago. And that was a tragedy for James's family and for people associated with him. But it has had a strange postscript, in that a coronial report released in the last couple of weeks suggests that James took his life with the assistance of a man who sold him a suicide kit. And I'm not going to go into more details of what was in that kit, but it was a Canadian man who advertised that service or these products online. And a coronial inquest found that James was able to order and purchase these things, receive them by mail order, and take his own life with those products. And 3 other New Zealanders used the same method to take their lives. But then more than that, we find that this is part of an international story, and that these suicide kits have been peddled via the internet all over the world. The story goes back to Canada and is being covered there by, amongst others, John Woodward, a journalist with CTV News in Canada. I talked to John earlier this week, and I thought it might be useful, having given this some ethical consideration, to cover this story here in New Zealand. So John joins us by phone line now from Canada. John, thank you for joining us on the platform.
Hey, thanks for having me.
John, firstly, just tell us, the chap at the centre of this, Ken Law, he was essentially selling suicide kits by mail order.
That's what we can tell from the information we have. After he was arrested in May 2023, you could look at the various company names that were told to us by the police, names like I'm Time and Eskimo, and things that didn't really make a lot of sense by themselves. But once you used, Internet Archive tools and other things, you could see the pictures of what these websites look like, and they sold, as you said, suicide kits of a various different sorts, and we don't have to go into what they are, but that was reasonably jarring for people to see that suicide kits were widely available on e-commerce platforms. The main Canadian one is called Shopify, and it's very easy to order it just like you would any other internet product. But we found out that among Kenneth Law's products that he was selling were these kits.
Okay, where did he sell them? How widely did he distribute them? And this wasn't on the dark web, as you said. This was Shopify. This was mainstream websites.
Yeah, mainstream websites that we probably used to order other products. So the intelligence that we were able to look at is that he had sold some 1,200 kits over the period of a few years to at least 40 countries, and that has resulted in a very widespread international story. Many of these things were sent to the United Kingdom. When you look at the distribution pattern, most of it is to English-speaking countries. But for some reason, the UK footprint is the largest that we've been able to find. And you can imagine that with many different police forces over the world, many different grieving families would have approached the police forces, which in isolation didn't put things together. And it wasn't until an investigation by a UK journalist put 6 different families together and realized they had all ordered from this same Canadian website or group of websites. And he then went to Canada and met Kenneth Law outside his Canada Post office in a Toronto suburb of Mississauga, that's in Ontario, in Canada, and confronted him and did the story. And that's when I think a lot of people woke up, especially in law enforcement. In the UK, it became a very big story that prompted a lot of national attention. Something called the National Crime Agency did a roundup of the number of cases and found almost 100 different people who had died and over 200 people who had ordered. Over in Canada, the Peel Police initially, and then a number of different police agencies around Ontario started to look, and they found 14 cases in Ontario alone. And so then it kind of fell upon us to do what we could to keep track of the international scope of this. And so you're looking at, like I say, about 100 in the UK, around 20 in Canada. These are deaths that I'm talking about. A handful in the United States, a handful in Australia, a handful in Ireland, and of course the 4 that you've mentioned in New Zealand.
So 150 people or more have died using a product that this guy, Ken Law, sold online.
Our count's 129, and that is incomplete because some of the agencies that we talk to don't share. So some of the agencies will, some won't. Police, sometimes it's coroners, sometimes we're really dealing with a whole world of variety here. And
that's a big number. What charges is he facing in Canada?
So in Canada, in Ontario, he's charged with 14 counts of first-degree murder for the 14 cases in Ontario, and 14 counts of aiding and abetting suicide, which is a first in Canada. No one, to our knowledge, has been charged with murder for a similar act, essentially selling a kit to somebody around the world. And and Ontario is in a unique place here, because although the UK is sort of the epicenter in terms of numbers, they're struggling in a sense because of the jurisdiction problem. A police agency only wants to prosecute crimes in its own jurisdiction. Otherwise, you get sort of the turf wars, I guess, if you will, between law enforcement agencies. And so the question of where this crime happened actually has a very real-world implication in which police force is going to prosecute. Everywhere outside Canada has that problem, but Ontario is unique in a sense in that the items were mailed from here and they were also received from here. And so any police officer in Ontario can then say, because they have that jurisdiction throughout there, they can say the crime and the death, alleged crime, I suppose, and the death happened in the same jurisdiction. And that's why Ontario is this laboratory now for whether this will be a crime that'll be convicted. All
right. What about Shopify? What about the places that hosted his bizarre sales exploits?
Yeah, so one of the first questions that we had is exactly that. How is it possible that a product like this was sold alongside normal things, bike helmets, cooking? So there's a bunch of answers to that question. The first is that this item, which we are not naming, is a common thing that is legal to be sold in, let's call it vaguely industrial kitchens. It's something that is used, it has an industrial use, and it is legal for people to buy.